All right, welcome to the Progression Health Podcast. I'm Ross Dempsey with my first guest on my first episode, Shannon Beer. Shannon's going to introduce herself and we're going to get into a few questions. So I'll let you take it away, Shannon.
Firstly, thank you for having me. I always find it difficult to introduce myself, but I guess my official title would be as a registered nutritionist. But ultimately, I really like to help people to feel good in their bodies, enjoy food again, and get the most out of their lives. So that is pretty much what my coaching is aimed towards. And I also mentor other coaches on an approach that I have termed comprehensive coaching, which is like a coaching framework that I created in collaboration with Dr. Gabrielle Fondaro. So we host a bunch of like webinar series and also do personal mentoring for other coaches. So I'm part-time coach, part-time mentor, and also like to kind of in my personal life travel around and move around a whole lot. So that's basically what I'm up to on a daily basis.
Brilliant. Yeah. So you're very busy and you're well connected. And actually, I was at a Renaissance periodization seminar and I met Dr. Fondaro. So she has a lot of good information and she's a great person to be working with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've learned a lot from her.
So we'll kick it off with the questions we have here. So what's your experience working with clients? So I meant to say from the start and up until now, you've gone into that a little bit. And then what's kind of like, I guess, your ideal client or the area you specialize in? So start to finish and then your ideal client.
Yeah, I guess when I started out as a coach, I would just kind of work with whoever required my help, which was a wide range of people. And I always had the advice, find your niche, like you'll find your niche and then you'll attract the type of people that you want to work with. And I never really knew what that meant. But over time, I think my work with people, I began to notice some common barriers that seemed quite difficult to address, like, for example, body dissatisfaction, difficulty with regulating eating behaviors. And I realized that it wasn't just like a knowledge deficit. So I think when I started out, I was very much on the side of like education is empowerment. If you just teach people a bit more about nutrition, then that will help. Whereas now I've come to realize that most people have a general idea of what to do, and most people don't need to know the details, in order to be generally healthy. And my interest in like the nerdy details surrounding nutrition weren't really practically applicable. And as I say, I noticed that people were struggling with sort of dietary restraint, which is more so like a cognitive and psychological phenomena, and also body dissatisfaction. So I began to explore those areas of research in order to help the people that I was working with. So I was like, I don't really know what to do here. I can see that you're struggling with something and I don't actually have any advice to offer, but I would like to help. So that's kind of where my research interests began. And over time, I guess I have attracted that type of clientele. So people who don't feel happy in their bodies and would like to learn how to feel better, probably have some body composition goals, maybe are struggling with feeling guilty about what they're eating or feeling like a loss of control over their food choices, and just really want some help to regain that control, find, I guess, peace and freedom with what they're eating, and learn how to feel good about themselves, whilst they're doing that. And the ultimate goal then being, having a secure sense of who one is and feeling good about that so that you can engage in life, essentially. So knowing, on a rational level, okay, I know that there's more to life than how I look, but how do I actually live that belief? Because I think it's one thing agreeing with that and another thing putting it into practice. So that's kind of now the type of person that I work with the most.
Yeah, very good. That's a very interesting transition. It kind of sounds like you're helping people fit food into their life. As like you grow older, your relationship with food changes a lot and the food environment changes a lot. And that's a lot trickier than people would think. You don't think about eating a whole lot as you're younger, but as you get older, it really becomes like a big part of your life.
Yeah, and I think in conjunction with that, not only does food become a larger part of our lives, but we become much more self-conscious. We're aware that there's pressure to look a certain way. We want to fit in, we want to impress people, we want to have friends, we want to feel accomplished. And I think all of that leads into, one avenue that people kind of channel that towards is changing their body composition, and like, you know, in order to feel worthy, in order to feel impressive, and I guess to gain a sense of confidence. So I find that the body image and the eating behaviors really go hand in hand, and working on both simultaneously has been really effective for helping improve people's like quality of life.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how it's not funny as you experience it, but it's funny how you try to change your eating behaviors and your body image can get like kind of worse, you know. Like you might initially, be growing up and you would think, I've no kind of issues with my my eating patterns and my body image, all these kind of things, and then you start to become aware of them more as you come older, and that's where, like, all the pitfalls start becoming more apparent, and you can really get yourself in a bind and an unhealthy spot with your relationship with food and how you view your own body, which, a lot of people, they don't actually have any kind of diagnosed conditions, like as far as their body goes anyway, or like mentally, but they can kind of make some kind of mistakes that are, where we kind of make our living in helping people have a better body image and relationship with food.
Exactly. And actually, like a large majority of my client base work within the industry, which is,
right.
You might think is quite funny, because from an outsider's perspective, these people, quote unquote, look the part, they're in great shape. So surely they must feel good about themselves.
Yeah.
But it's not actually like the case, because someone's body image isn't necessarily a direct representation of what they actually look like. It has a lot more to do with how we perceive ourselves. So I've also worked with people coming off the back end of like bikini competitions who, may have been in, again, quote unquote, it's all subjective, but what people may perceive to be the best shape of their lives, and actually found that they were more dissatisfied than ever, probably due to the increased like preoccupation with food, preoccupation with one's appearance, and constantly like body checking. All of these things can contribute to body image dissatisfaction, which is funny, again, because from an outsider's perspective, well, they look great, what's the problem? But actually that forms a large part of my client base. So not only do I mentor coaches, but I actually coach other coaches as well for their own sort of body image and eating behaviors.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so often I'll hear a client, like, as a personal trainer, clients will say, oh, I want to have abs. And I'm like, I don't think you do, but like, until you experience that, I can't really, give you the insight into how that feels. And like all of their psychological or physiological markers, for example, blood pressure or, resting heart rate, would improve as their physique, quote unquote, improved as well, as it got leaner. But mentally, is it just, I don't know, is it just part of the game, do you think, where someone becomes healthier from maybe a place where they weren't healthy and they become more self-conscious as well? Or is it like it's not guaranteed that someone is going to become more self-conscious and self-critical as they become healthier? Does that make sense?
It's definitely not guaranteed. But there are certain sort of forms of dieting that may increase someone's risk of developing body dissatisfaction. So it really depends on like the process and the individual's like characteristics. For example, do they have perfectionist tendencies? That would be a risk factor. Do they already have body dissatisfaction and then engaging in a diet? That would put them at risk. Are they focusing on weight and shape, or are they focusing on health? That would be probably have a different outcome, or at least influence the outcome in a different direction. So really, there are like a lot of factors that go into it. And it's not to say that, going on a diet is always going to harm someone, or changing someone's body is always going to make them feel worse. And that's also not to say that changing someone's body will make them feel better either, because that's almost like a side effect. It's not a direct indicator of anything. For example, physical exercise can help someone feel better about their body. They may or may not lose weight as a result of that exercise, depending on their baseline level of activity and, a whole host of other things. So weight loss can occur, but it wouldn't be the weight loss that has caused the improvements in body image, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So basically, diets aren't inherently good or bad. It's all about, how you view them and how you approach them, the tools you use as you diet. If you do diet.
Yeah, exactly. And it really is someone's like intentions and motivations for doing so that are the main thing to consider there. And the issue being that most people with body dissatisfaction are very set on dieting in order to lose weight. So their focus is in a place that would put them at risk. And potentially part of the role of a coach may be to help, meet them where they're at, but broaden their perspective to include other motivations for wanting to, partake in a diet. So hopefully trying to move away from emphasizing the weight and shape and towards emphasizing overall health. And weight loss, can occur. We don't have to get rid of those desires. It's just about making sure we do it in a healthy way.
Yeah. All about how you do it. So then kind of continuing on dieting, I first came across you through an ebook, and just since you wrote that ebook, a couple of years ago, I think it was, how has your thoughts on dieting changed? And then would there be any kind of recommendations you'd make differently, knowing now what you do as opposed to what you did back then?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely learned a lot since. I feel like I'm learning, all the time. I could barely kind of keep up with everything. But the ebook that you're referring to, I called Life After Dieting, and the purpose behind that was to provide a framework to help people move away from dieting, once they've achieved their results. Now, that was the initial sort of, I guess, perspective that I was coming from. But now I would say that many people would benefit from moving away from dieting, even if they haven't achieved the dream body that they think that they want, So I think that's something that's valuable to consider at any stage of someone's sort of journey is, what process am I putting into practice, and what are my intentions behind this, and what outcomes am I actually looking for? So the ebook had steps for moving away from tracking macros, how to find your maintenance, how to navigate social situations, and I think those are all important skill sets. So I would still, agree with the steps involved in that sense. But I do think that I've broadened my perspective on, what constitutes a goal as well. Like, you can have a goal outside of manipulating your body composition. If the ultimate goal is to feel more confident, then there are probably actually more effective ways to guarantee that result rather than simply dieting. It could be a case of working on self-acceptance, for example. That would be one component of, I guess, building sort of self-worth and working on that. And I think we are at least I was to begin with, was like, yeah, cool, I can help people lose weight, I can help, I know how to do this. But it wasn't really serving the purpose, which for me was to, again, always comes back to actually enhancing someone's quality of life. And again, there are so many factors that go into it that I think that solely considering the nutritional factors doesn't really get you far, because we can't change someone's nutrition outside of the context of their life, right? It's something that we have to do on a daily basis. We have to eat multiple times a day. Eating often involves socializing. So sometimes these physique goals, which may have been, I guess, internalized through images that we like portray, are subject to like from the media, particularly like social media, don't really, I think people have a different idea of what they'll actually get when they reach that stage. Like you said, people coming to you saying, oh, I want abs. And you're like, but what do you actually want? What do you mean when you say you want abs? Because if the whole world was blind, abs wouldn't get you anywhere. So what do you actually want? You want to feel more confident. You want better relationships. You don't want to feel self-conscious. Well, again, the abs don't guarantee any of that. So how about we figure out what you truly want and put the steps in place to get to those things, and improved energy levels. Awesome. Well, then we can make some, potentially make some changes to your nutrition. Again, weight loss may or may not occur. Maybe they will end up with abs. Who knows? But we're not like using that as a measure of success per se. It's about figuring out what someone thinks that body represents to them. And I found that in discussion, a lot of people are hung up on the idea of getting super lean because they think it represents self-control, it represents discipline, dedication. And I think unpicking thought patterns, like that can be really valuable, because who's to say that abs actually represent self-discipline? What about being disciplined in other areas of your life, such as like holding your tongue when you want to say something when you probably shouldn't? You can't tell much about a person's character from looking at their body. So why do we value the body more than the person? That would be my question.
Yeah, very interesting. That monologue, I think you call that, was a testament to all that you've learned since the ebook. You have so much to offer. One thing that you said that was interesting is people have a goal, like they think they want abs, or they think they want to improve their health because they have this kind of idea that it'll get them something they don't have.
Yeah,
I think it's like so important to question why. You're just making it obvious to me now. It's like, yeah, but why do you want this goal? Like, what do you think it's going to change about your life? And then you said as well about the improving people's quality of life. So not just getting them from 20 to 10% body fat, like, because that could actually worsen their quality of life, because they might miss out on social events, for example, or they mightn't be sleeping as well, or their energy might be lower. So how would you go about like improving a person's quality of life when you're working with a client? Like, would it just be, you just you explain that kind of point a little bit more, please.
Yeah, so I think firstly, it comes back to identifying, as you say, what someone actually wants. So yeah, I have this physique goal. Okay, why is that important to you? What do you want to achieve? Or again, I want to be more confident. Okay, why is confidence more important to you? What would you be doing in a world where you were more confident? And it could be things like, I would feel more comfortable getting intimate with my partner. I would stop holding myself back. I wouldn't be anxious about socializing and anxious about the food that's on offer. I would have more fun. I'd be more relaxed. It's like, oh, okay, so these are all the things that are important to you. So at the start of the coaching process, I really like to utilize values work drawn from acceptance and commitment training. So values are essentially guiding directions, like qualities that we'd like to bring to our behaviors. And there's something that we all have, but we don't necessarily pay attention to. So if you think about values being qualities of behaviors, we all act on a daily basis in a certain way. So we must have like an internal guiding system, but we're not always aware of it. And sometimes we can get distracted from that. So if someone wants to change their body to achieve confidence so that they can have more fun with their friends, well, then potentially the value underlying that would be connection. And we can take steps to set goals that are in alignment with that value of connection, and set action points based on those goals that are outside of manipulating your body composition, or can be done in conjunction with whatever dietary approach someone's choosing. If you value connection and you want to have more fun with your friends, yeah, maybe you can diet and try and get in shape, but you could also, how about just setting up some dates, setting up some calls with your friends, going out and arranging things to do. Things like that would be a way of sort of goal setting outside of or in conjunction with like nutrition changes. So I think getting an idea of what's really important to a person, and potentially identifying values that they feel are lacking in their life right now, and then setting goals based on those values. So you can think of like in, and then goals as checkpoints along the way.
You just cut out there, sorry, Shannon. What was the first part of the point you were making?
No worries. Yeah, just that, you can think of values as the direction that you're going in, and then goals as checkpoints along the way to make sure that you're on track. And the benefit of that is that this allows you a lot more flexibility. Someone may, if they're setting goals in the absence of values, they may get hung up on achieving these goals, even if they're not actually improving their quality of life. For example, the goal may be to get to 10% body fat. If you're so like narrow focused on that goal, you might not realize that it's taking you away from your value of connection, because now you can't socialize because you're scared about what food's on offer, or you're so busy in the gym and super inflexible about changing your schedule when things come up, because again, you're so set on achieving that 10% body fat. Well, now that's actually probably detracting from your quality of life and moving you further away from the person that you want to be. So having these values allows you to pivot when you recognize that a goal may no longer be helpful for you. So that's one place that I would start to ensure that we're on the right track, is actually getting an idea of what does this person care about? What do they want their life to be like? And how can we reconcile that with their health and fitness goals?
Brilliant. Yeah, that's very practical, actually. Like, I like how simple it sounds. And then also, it's not like, you typically think, or, I feel as though clients would think that when they're working with someone to improve their health, this person is going to give them something. And it's like, you're definitely offering a lot. There's no doubt about that. But also, you're getting rid of a lot of the kind of the beliefs, the ideas that are just not serving what they actually want, which is like very interesting, because you don't really hear that a lot, So that's nice to hear.
I think the approach that I like to take is very much like client-centered, in that I view myself as a guide rather than telling someone what to do or giving them things, as you say, that actually helping them to come to their own realizations and figuring out where they want to go. And I can, give them pointers, give them advice, things that they may want to take on board, but ultimately they're the ones leading themselves, and I'm just like helping them along the way, rather than like, oh, here's a plan for you to follow, off you go. It's not that wouldn't be my style of coaching. So I think that actually giving someone the tools to make their own decision is ultimately more empowering and rewarding.
Yeah, that's a really nice way to explain it. Kind of like, you don't know exactly where the client is going to go, but you're like, you're there with them, like kind of, almost walking through a forest. You're like, I've experience of, doing these things, so I'll be able to guide you if you run into challenges. So that's great. And then the next question is, the direction of the nutrition industry. I feel like it's, it's always changing, but it's really shifting away from pretty much your ebook kind of like really hit the nail on the head at the time, where it's like it's getting away from the calorie and macro tracking, and as your approach is now much more about the person and the psychology. So could you just talk a little bit about the kind of the trend you see the nutrition industry heading?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's kind of difficult to speak to because I only know what I see online. I don't know what's going on in the industry in general. But from my limited perspective, I think that coaching probably originally took off, and it was very much geared towards athletes or like physique competitors, power lifters, and then began to, I think, expand to include like general population, people who aren't athletes, just like working out, want to feel good, like setting goals for themselves, and want to make improvements. And I think that for those types of people, and again, this includes athletes as well, but I think we started off with it was very much like macros based coaching, and that seemed to be the default for everyone, and there wasn't really a consideration. It was just like, well, this is what's worked for me, so let me teach you what I know, without really taking in the individual's own experiences into account. And as I say, thinking more broadly, one, about what health means, that it's not just physical health, but includes like psychological well-being, social health, intellectual health, emotional health. I like to include philosophical health as well, which again sort of comes back to that values, like having your own sense of direction of where you're going, your own sense of understanding of the world. So I think firstly, broadening our perspective on what it means to be healthy, and then making these lifestyle changes, these nutrition and training changes in context. So understanding, oh, actually, there's like cultural considerations to bear in mind. So we're not just working with an individual, we're working with an individual who lives in a certain environment, and that has to come into play. And again, thinking about, sure, this is one part of a person's life. What else do they care about? What else have they got going on? And making sure that any of our guidance there serves to enhance other aspects of their life rather than impeding on them. So I think that the direction that is moving towards is just a more of a realization of all these other factors that go into the consideration. And as you say, things like body positivity or psychological acceptance, that those things are also important to consider when we're bearing in mind the ultimate outcome that the majority of people seek, which is, some kind of improvement in quality of life, or like achieving set goals. Well, those things, again, probably can't be achieved through nutrition related changes alone.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, instead of having a plan and fitting the client to the plan, you're considering the client as a whole and how you can cater to them, it sounds like.
Yeah. And I think like it was very much, oh, I'm the expert, I'm the coach, you've hired me to tell you what to do and to share my expertise, which I don't really think is how transformations, in coaching really occur. I think most people maybe have that expectation of that's what the coaching process is going to be like. But ultimately, if you're helping someone to achieve their goals, well, then they're the experts in their own experience. They're the only ones who know truly what their preferences are, and what they actually want from life. So we have to be able to adapt our approaches to meet the person that we're working with. And if we can't do so, that's not the fault of the client. That's just either an inappropriate fit or just not something that you're equipped to do, and that's okay. But I think, recognizing that actually the client has a lot to bring to the relationship. And that's important for us to know if the goal is to give them what they want, not what you want as a coach.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, they've gotten this far in their life, overcoming, the challenges that life has thrown at them. And, that experience that they have has a lot of value in it. And just going on about how we're getting away from giving a client a set plan. It's like, in my head, and I'm sure in your head as well, you'll see like forcing the plan onto the client or just pushing that idea is incorrect. But then it still amazes me how some clients will be like, and can I just get a meal plan as well? Just, and I'm like, that is the absolute like epitome of what we don't want to give you. I want you to think independently. So it's kind of like there's a bit of a lag time between like people who are working in the fitness industry and then the actual general population. So I guess that's where, we come in, trying to educate the people.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's not to say that having these plans in place is like always to be avoided. There's nothing wrong with starting off on a meal plan to provide someone some structure. And actually, very structured eating can be helpful for specific populations. But again, like if the end goal is to increase someone's like autonomy, help them make informed decisions, they will get to a stage where they're able to do that. But yeah, sure, like meal plans may be part of the process, but I think it's like really helpful to it'd be great if we could change the expectations that a client comes to us with, through, I guess, our own messaging of what's really important. And I guess the ingredients have changed there because, of course, people just a simple solution, and we all love simple solutions, so it's very understandable as to why someone would want that. I think it's like a work in progress to get them to that stage where they're like confident, competent, and making their own decisions and being flexible when they're doing so.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's kind of like knowing, there's so many tools out there. It's knowing which tool to use in which scenario. That's what I guess separates the best from, the kind of the average coaches out there, or guides, as you say.
Yeah, absolutely. That actually forms like a large part of the comprehensive coaching framework. So we've come up with what we've termed the spectrum of intentional eating. So that covers mechanical eating, that covers like macro tracking, it covers intuitive eating, mindfulness, meal planning, all of these things that we've kind of put into a spectrum to help coaches, broaden their tool sets so that they're not just their skill sets or their toolbox or whatever. They're not just working with one approach, but they've got a wide variety of approaches to choose from. And they're, again, working with the client's preferences and able to take someone through all these approaches if it's appropriate. There's nothing wrong with helping someone to, I guess, rehabilitate their relationship with food through intuitive eating, and then moving into macro tracking, and then transitioning away from macro tracking. That's something I think you don't have to choose just one approach. I think having a wide variety of tools and knowledge base to accompany in that is what makes a coach more effective in helping more people.
Moving people through a stage, because you don't want to keep them in the same stage, as they become more experienced, as they become more accustomed to what they're doing, they might need to change the approach to get to new goals they might come across as they work with you. Yeah. All right. And then, so question I was thinking about a lot is, you have kind of like, we'll say, the way I see health is there's kind of the three parts. There's like the food you eat, the activity you do, and then just psychology. Like that's like that's such a vague kind of statement, but or word to use, but just kind of maybe like your mindset or your outlook. Would you say that like psychology is the most important, or it's equally important, or how would it fit in among those three? Would you say there's like a fourth element that I'm not considering? Would you talk a little bit about that and just your thoughts on psychology as it relates to health?
Yeah, I think psychology is crucial to our conceptualization of health. And I think that there is potentially a bit of apprehension, from, say, personal trainers or coaches about learning more about psychology, because, I'm not a psychologist, which is, fair enough consideration, but everyone has mental health. So you can't get away from the fact that a consideration of psychology is important, especially when many of our eating behaviors may be, for example, tied to psychological factors like emotional regulation or where body image comes in. These we can't ignore them. So I think that having an understanding of how that relates to the work that we do with the populations that we work with, especially considering, say, like the prevalence of disordered eating behaviors, which would be subclinical and maybe brushed under the rug if there's a lack of awareness. And again, with these body image issues, like body dissatisfaction is super, super common. And if you're helping someone to change their body image, knowing that majority of people dieting potentially do have body dissatisfaction, I think it just, there's an impetus on us as personal trainers or coaches to be aware of these things and know that there are things that we can do to help people with these issues as well. Even if we're not psychologists, you just have to be very aware of like your scope of practice and where there is room to help. But if you think about it, most people would benefit from having some techniques to, say, challenge unhelpful thoughts or diffuse from unhelpful thoughts. So not letting them like dictate what you do. Maybe some like basic emotional regulation skills, or even just simply the ability to identify how you're feeling, and steps to reduce, say, comparisons with other people. What do I do when I find myself comparing myself to others? That tends to not make me feel so great. Wouldn't it be nice if I had some strategies to follow in those situations? Or how can I learn to appreciate myself a little bit more? The majority of people would benefit from things like this. And I think I was very much inspired by the work of Keyes, who pictured sort of mental health along a spectrum and had, say, like people in the middle as languishing. So not really like on the pathological or the clinical side of things, but just like doing okay. How can we help the people that are doing okay to flourish, which would be to sort of prosper? And that's what I was interested in. It's like, yeah, I'm interested for my own well-being. I'm interested for the people that I work with. Like, how could we just improve the quality of our life? And I think there are so many benefits from looking to like these psychological techniques for like inspiration on, that's very helpful for a wide range of people, not just those who suffer with like clinical levels of pathology. So I would say that psychology is really crucial, and there's a lot of scope to help improve someone's health with a little bit of knowledge in that area.
Yeah, it sounds as though the problems you're talking about are not that like, not to diminish anyone's problems that they have, but they're not that like kind of unique or sophisticated. Like they're all human problems, like comparison is the thief of joy. And it doesn't matter who you are, everyone at some point compares themselves to someone else. And most of the time it's not really useful. We're not really considering, as you say, we're not appreciating, what we've done ourselves, or we're looking externally basically. And that's, a recipe for disaster. So then for the next one, so a lot of my clients, they have body composition goals when they first come in. I want to, for example, post-pandemic, I'm trying to shed a few pounds or build some muscle. Usually what happens is, we get really, well into the training, but because my area of expertise is not the psychology and not the nutrition side of things, we do great with the exercise, we do great with the training, but then they find it tricky with the nutrition. I'm trying to, almost trying to, wear a few hats at the same time. So is there any kind of one area you would recommend, let's just say for myself as a personal trainer or other personal trainers, or someone who's going it alone, we'll say post-pandemic, they're trying to improve their health, to improve their body composition? Is there like one kind of change they could make? or area to start off with first, or some questions I could ask even?
Yeah, I think relating it back to the idea of improving someone's health and potentially moving them away from, or just giving them additional reasons to eat well outside of just manipulating their body compositions. Because the more reasons you have to do something, the more likely you probably are to do it. So sure, someone could eat more vegetables because they're low in calories, and that would probably help them to lose fat if they're replacing, whatever they were eating before with additional vegetables. And sure, that might result in an energy deficit. But what about, like, why is improving your health valuable to you? What would an increase in energy like do for you in your life? What are you, again, tying it back to the values, what do you care about and what do you want to achieve, and how does sort of being the best version of yourself contribute to that? So I think having some additional motivations outside of simply the fat loss and the muscle gain, not to negate those things, but again, we're just adding on more reasons to do something. That could be a good place to start. And also, I think really having some like an attitude of like compassion towards ourselves, which I know, is often met with like eyes rolled, like, oh, that sounds like really airy fairy. Surely if I'm compassionate towards myself, I'm just going to be complacent. But the rationale being that we often place very high expectations and standards upon ourselves. And when we fall short of our own expectations, we can very easily slip into like a very self-critical cycle where, we beat ourselves up for not having the perfect diet or for not losing weight quick enough. And when we do that, usually just serves to make us feel worse. And that may be where a lot of self-sabotaging like behaviors begin. Oh, I'm going to fail anyway, so why not just carry on eating? I've already blown it. That sort of attitude probably isn't helpful for people. So I think allowing yourself some grace, being patient with yourself, being like more objective as well. You can say, oh, you know what, I did overeat on that day and it didn't actually make me feel good after. I can look at that situation from a detached perspective and not take it personally and say, this is the thing that I would change for next time. So when you're more compassionate towards yourself, you're actually just giving yourself space to make improvements. Because when you're beating yourself up, you just want to hide and run away and avoid, doing anything about the situation because you don't feel good. So I think, even outside of nutritional advice, just being kind to yourself when you feel like you've slipped up, knowing that you're trying your best and you can always make improvements, like that's okay. And the criticism potentially isn't serving you in any way. And then also, again, maybe not trying to change everything at once. Is there, looking at your diet currently, where would be the best place to start? One small improvement that you can make that would take you towards the direction that you want to head, just begin there. All you've got to do is do better than the week previous or do better than the day before. And again, this isn't a linear process, not to say that every day is going to be an improvement upon the last, but just in general, you don't need to overhaul your life just to see results, and taking it gradually seems to be more effective in the sense that it helps build someone's confidence with making a change. Cool, I can handle that one step that I'm going to focus on. Doing it one thing at a time, you can then build upon that. I've set myself a goal. I just need to sort my breakfast out for this week because it's all over the place. I'm eating irregularly. Sometimes I skip it. Sometimes I'm on the go, whatever it is. Potentially that's the best place for me to start. So this week, I'm just going to focus on, including a source of protein at breakfast. That's my one main target. Once I've nailed that, then I'll consider where would be the next improvement and just go from there. So I think removing some of that urgency and that desperation to achieve the goal as soon as possible and giving yourself a bit of grace in the meantime probably will lead to more effective, long-lasting results over time. So essentially that will be the quickest way, in the end.
Wow, yeah, that really is like an amazingly practical answer. Like, I know you can almost play like, it's like a debate in your head where you're like, will I eat healthy? Will I eat this healthy meal? Will I do this bit activity? And then you start to go down the rabbit hole of like the reasons against it or the reasons for it, and providing more reasons for it, like presenting a stronger case to yourself. And this is why I'd be big on planning, like, ahead of time, having done this work, you talk about values and stuff. It's like being very clear on your values so that they're front of mind and at the forefront of your thinking when, time is short or you have a demanding day or something like that, and you can make the best decisions for your health. And Another point you made about like, you know, if you're having a poor day nutrition wise and you're like, oh sure, you know, why does it matter? I'll just keep on eating as I am. It doesn't matter. It reminds me of like what Lane Norton used to say years ago about like how if we have one flat tire, we don't just go get out of the car and slash the other three just because that's how things are going, you know. And yeah, it's like back to the point as well about how important psychology is. Basically, you know, it's slowing down, chunking the phase down. You know, you don't start training for a marathon and run, you know, 20 miles in the first week or whatever. You might run, you know, 5, and then you gradually build and get better week to week, or, you know, month to month. So yeah, that's very practical. Brilliant answer.
I have a very similar analogy I like to use. If a bird shits on your window screen, you don't smash up the entire car. The problem is that we can't recognize when we're doing it to ourselves. So I think developing that level of self-awareness is also really important. So having some awareness of your thought process, you know, how are you speaking to yourself? Are you able to identify when you become critical, you know, and what you're telling yourself in those moments, and then how it makes you feel, and then how you're acting in response to that? Seeing that connection between your thoughts, your feelings, and your behaviors, I think is really important, because then you're like, oh, okay, now I can see what I want to change. And rather than telling myself just to try harder, just to be more disciplined, potentially I can reframe those thoughts with, you know what, yeah, sure, like you're doing your best, and one poor, you know, choice at dinner doesn't ruin all of the other days that I've done well so far. So I'm just going to make a different decision next time. You know, to being able to see, I think that connection there is really important. So that self-awareness would be crucial as well.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So something I was thinking of with clients is like, I can't remember what comment it was that made me think, but it was just kind of like, you know, I don't have, you know, my health all perfectly figured out, or, you know, just because I look healthy, or, you know, a coach might look healthy, it doesn't mean that they are healthy 100% of the time. It's the way I would like to describe it to someone who's like newer to managing their health is that when a challenge comes, it still sets me back just like anybody else, but my ability to bounce back and like to reduce the intensity of that challenge or the severity of it, you know, over the long term is less than my younger self, who kind of might have got thrown off for a much longer time and might have been thrown back, you know, much more so than I am now. So yeah, it's a lot about perspective and how you see it. You know, that could be perceived, you know, a bird shitting on your window could be perceived as good luck by some people, you know, not even as a reason to smash up the whole car.
Yeah, I think what you just mentioned there comes back to that component of self-compassion, you know, the common humanity. Well, we're all just here like trying our best, and we all make mistakes, and nobody has their shit 100% together, and that's absolutely fine. I think that also ties into the idea of a coach as a guide, rather than putting a coach on a pedestal, you know, and feeling like you have to be the perfect example before you can help anyone else, because it's not about that. It's just about having a different vantage point and different area of expertise and helping someone with that. So again, yeah, nobody's perfect, and that's not the point. The point is that we're all figuring out what we want, and we're taking steps towards that, and that really is the process, you know.
Yeah, not to get all corny, but it's not about, you know, where you are, it's about where you're going, you know, that kind of quote of having compassion really, and just giving yourself a break when you slip up, and, you know, being allowed to celebrate when you actually do something good, like, you know, as in, I think people, you know, sometimes they don't take time to celebrate, you know, or they might celebrate for the wrong reasons. Oh, it's the end of a week, I made it through the week, you know, they're just kind of celebrating for the sake of it, versus, oh, I actually got this, you know, milestone achieved, and I'm going to slow down, savor this moment, and then wait a while before setting the next goal. You know, sometimes
Yeah,
people are too quick to set the next goal once they've achieved one.
absolutely. And what I found that in practice is all of this is far easier said than done. So most people would agree on a rational level. Sure, it doesn't matter. There's more to life than how I look. Sure, like I should be kind to myself. That makes sense, you know, but actually putting these things into practice can be very difficult. And that's why I think it's important for, or at least, you know, it could be a good avenue for coaches to explore, is having practical tools to help people, you know, to even assess these things in people, and then to intervene, you know, put interventions in place, and then measure outcomes, so that you're actually seeing changes in a person's perspective, in their quality of life, and in their behaviors. Because yeah, ultimately it's easy enough to say that this is important, but actually to help someone work on it is a different thing entirely.
Yeah, 100%. That reminds me of in behavior change research, there's I'm not sure what you would call it, basically like a term or an idea or a theory. It's called like the behavior intention gap. And basically, you know, it's kind of like talk is cheap essentially, but it's been proven in the research And it's like, once I realized there's actually a coined term for it, I saw it so much. You know, you start with a client and, you know, you're in the early sessions and they're like, or even just, you know, anyone in your circle or anyone you talk to, they say, I'm going to do this thing, you know, or this big goal. And I'm straight away, I'm like, right, let's reduce that by 20% because you haven't a clue. And either do I, like, I'm not, you know, the expert in this situation, but I just know talk is so cheap. And that's not a bad thing, but it's just the behavior is going to be really hard and we don't have an idea of how hard. So let's just, you know, protect against that. Let's, you know, achieve a smaller goal, build momentum, and then, you know, we can achieve the bigger goal in time. But it's going to actually do more harm than good to talk up this goal and think we're going to achieve it and then fall flat in our face because it's actually been too big of a goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's like a common human trait to have unrealistic expectations. Like that's not the fault of a client. It's like something that we all do, probably in different domains of life. You know, we underestimate how long something will take. We overestimate how easy it will be. We fail to take certain things into consideration, certain like contextual factors. So it's very difficult, I think, to actually make accurate goals and plans, which is why I think, again, that self-compassion and the ability to pivot, you know, and make adjustments and be flexible, those are all crucial skills because we're you know, we're very limited in how good we are at managing our own expectations.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're our own worst enemy most of the time. And then that just, you know, it ties into compassion. And it's very easy to play like the blame game and be like, oh, it was my fault, it was the trainer's fault, it was, you know, my cousin's fault at this party, they offered me this thing or whatever. And, you know, just have some compassion for yourself and a little bit of realism, or, you know, if you have any kind of support at all, you know, get a bit of feedback on, you know, I'm thinking of doing this. What do you think? Your partner, maybe a coach if you have one, to give you a bit of guidance.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And again, this is why acceptance is important as well,
Yeah.
because essentially acceptance means facing reality, saying, oh, okay, that happened and this is why, you know, and here's what I'm going to do about it, which is, again, probably totally opposite to what most people would expect. Oh, acceptance just means giving up. No, it means facing reality. You can't change something until you accept that it's occurred. So it really is like the precondition for making any changes. So yeah, I think that compassion and the acceptance sort of go hand in hand.
Yeah, you might be able to finish this quote for me. I think is it like Carl Rogers or someone? It's like, it's only once I accept myself I can change. Is that what it is?
Yeah,
Something like that.
paradox of change. Yeah, it's only when I accept myself that I'm able to change, something like that. I really recommend On Becoming a Person by Carl Rogers. Like one of my favorite reads.
Yeah, exactly. And then, yeah, once you accept that a problem exists and that it's there, you know, it's kind of like better the devil you know, almost, you know, because if you don't know what your enemy is that's trying to work through, you know, how can you change it? It's literally impossible because you don't know where to start. How will you have known when you're finished, or, you know, what's going on? I've taken up enough of your time here, so I have 3 questions left from like clients, and this is like a kind of a client question that I know is important. So we'll do these kind of quick questions, and we'll finish up after that. So how does intuitive eating tie into fitness goals? So how can I ensure I get enough protein when eating intuitively? Because, you know, you're literally leaving it a lot more to chance. So yeah, any kind of short answer on how to eat intuitively and hit your fitness goals as well at the same time?
Yeah, the short answer is you don't, because intuitive eating is actually like intuitive eating TM is an intervention that is designed to break the cycle of chronic dieting and fix someone's relationship with food. So it's analogous to asking, you know, how do I max out on my squat whilst rehabilitating my injury? It's like, you don't do both at the same time. If you mean how can I ensure I get enough protein without tracking macros, that's a different question, because intuitive eating is different from simply not tracking macros. So to answer that question, I think most people know what to do. It's just having that confidence in themselves that they're doing the right thing. Most people can eyeball a serving of portion of protein within each meal. You know, most people, if the general range is anywhere between, say, like 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of protein, on average, I think most people, when they're tracking their macros, tend to just set themselves a goal of 2 grams per kilogram as like an easy heuristic. Knowing that it's okay for your protein intake to fluctuate as well. I think this is a thing. It doesn't have to be like on the gram every day and you're not tracking, but trying to make sure that you're getting, a specific number. So simply aiming to include a protein source with each meal will get you the majority of the way there. And if your protein needs are slightly higher, maybe you're a male, or you're dieting or whatever it is, and having a protein-based snack a day. So using your palm as a portion size, having a source in each meal, and if you need to, having a protein-based snack. Most people can do that, and they know how to do that. It's more so second guessing themselves, I find, seems to be the bigger issue. So just have some confidence that, one, your protein intake, yeah, it's important, but it's probably not as important as you think it is. People tend to, once they sort of get into this way of eating, tend to overemphasize the role of protein, I think, to the detriment of other foods. So knowing that it's not that important, you probably are getting a sufficient amount, and just being mindful to include a source in each meal and potentially a snack if needed. And it really doesn't have to be any more complicated than that.
Yeah. So know that you probably will be inaccurate, be flexible. And then it sounds like basically have, just some semblance of a plan. So it's like you don't go from tracking your macros to the gram to doing absolutely no planning at all and just kind of, making it up as you go along. So
the thing is as well, most people eat similarly when they stop tracking their macros. You're not suddenly going to overhaul your entire diet just because you're not tracking it anymore. You're eating the same breakfast every day anyway, like maybe it's convenient for you. You probably have a few main meals that you like rotate between, and every now and then you'll try something different. That's just like the nature of a lifestyle. You're not eating different foods all of the time. So I think, just having some confidence that when you transition away from macro tracking, you're probably not going to change that much about what you're eating anyway. So I think, it's just actually reducing some of that emphasis on the protein intake can help give people peace of mind.
Yeah. Having a routine to what you eat, not eating a random meal every day. All right. So the next one, any insights into helping someone who has a negative body image, negative relationship with food? So that's two huge questions in one. I know you've kind of answered it a little bit, but do you have a short answer for those questions?
You could go on and on for like both of these questions, but I think helping someone with a negative body image, there's a lot to it. I actually have an entire webinar series aimed at coaches who want to help their clients improve how they feel about themselves. But I guess a few main steps would be, firstly, like changing how you think about yourself. So recognizing what assumptions you have about, for example, things we've touched on, what being lean really represents, and potentially forming new rational ways of thinking. Also being mindful of like social comparisons and addressing those, spending time with supportive people who respect you for who you are, and don't sort of emphasize looks so much, and being mindful of the social media content that you consume as well. Is this making you feel better or worse about yourself? Focusing on what your body can do. So you mentioned focusing on strength and performance, but also you can expand that further as well to include, all of the functions that your body performs, and learning to sort of appreciate and respect your body for what it does. For example, your ability to heal from illness, your ability to communicate with others. So when you can cuddle someone else, kissing people, like communicating with people. What about your creative endeavors? Reading, writing, listening to music, seeing wonderful sights, like being able to dance, hike. These are all things that your body allows you to do. So maybe just having some like appreciation for that and reflecting on that can help. And then also I'd say like focusing on other areas of your life is one of the biggest things. So knowing that even if you would sort of identify yourself as the fit person, the one who trains, there's obviously still a lot more to you as well. So putting some time and energy into your career, into your hobbies, into your education, your relationships, other interests that you have, to help, I think, keep that balanced perspective. And when it comes to food, that's sometimes like goes hand in hand with the body image work, but also I think allowing yourself some flexibility. So recognizing, again, your thought processes towards certain foods. Do you view certain foods as better or worse, or do you have a neutral outlook on foods? Do you consider the role that food plays in your life? Giving yourself permission to eat what you want when you want doesn't mean that you will eat everything all the time, because chances are you don't actually want to eat all the time, because you probably wouldn't feel great for it, but just giving yourself that permission to do so. Sometimes eating like outside of hunger is completely normal as well. So like this would be classed as the normal relationship with food, is mostly honoring your hunger, sometimes eating food just because it's there and just because you want it, like that's perfectly okay. Being able to regulate your emotions, not always using food. So maybe you're like unwind after a long week with like some chocolate at the end of the day, or like a glass of wine in the evening, or a social meal with your friends, but having other avenues to outlet like certain emotions would be like considered a healthy relationship with food. So yeah, there's like a number of things that would go into working on that. Just depends on what aspect you want to improve. But I try to speak to this a lot, like with some of my content or with my articles, like on my website. So potentially there'll be some more specific advice there, but that would be a general answer.
That's, yeah, a very comprehensive answer. Some great insight there. And then just the last one is kind of similar. So for body dysmorphia, you know, in men and in women, how common is it? And then what are just, I guess, how common is it? It doesn't really matter a whole lot, but just more like, what are strategies to protect against it? And, you know, what are some of the kind of the causes of it? You know, kind of a short answer on that one. And
yeah, I'm going to reframe to address body dissatisfaction, so slightly different to body dysmorphia, but body dissatisfaction is totally common. And I think that is important to realize, because most people feel a little bit of ashamed, you know, of not feeling confident in how they look or feeling dissatisfied with their appearance, without realizing that it's something that the majority of people go through at some stage, and that includes males as well as females. So I think that's just an important point to make. But then to protect against it, one of the most effective ways is increasing your body appreciation. So like I mentioned, being able to have gratitude for the functions that your body performs, and having focus on other areas of your life, I'd say would be two main strategies there. And recognizing that you are more than just a body. You know, if you got to the end of your life, like you'd probably want people to be like, oh, you know, he was like, Ross was such a great guy. He was so generous. He helped so many people, blah, blah, blah. Oh, and he happened to look quite nice. Like that would be one of the last things that you would want people to say about you. So I think just having like a strong sense of who you are and what you want, and keeping that perspective in mind can help. And developing sort of protective filters, I would say, because we're like, the environment that we live in is very much sort of geared towards making us feel dissatisfied, but there are steps that we can, you know, we're not destined to be dissatisfied forever. There are definitely things that we can do ourselves to help protect against that. So I think that just, you know, being careful of the messages that you consume, and being able to have like a critical eye about what you see. And also I think changing the way that you view other people. If you're idolizing people for how they look, you're objectifying them. You know, they're more than just a body as well. What about personality traits, again, that you can't see? You know, so I think being able to focus on these things, recognizing when you're objectifying others, and then broadening your idea of what it means to be attractive, what it means to be beautiful, which can include personality traits. Like seeing someone laugh is quite attractive. You know, people who are friendly, again, generous, confident. You can be confident in yourself as a person, and that doesn't depend on how you look. So I think keeping in mind all of these things can really help to protect against it.
yeah, it really ties back into the psychology points we made earlier, and kind of like just questioning your beliefs and your values. And then it's kind of just like looks and our body, it only has like so much utility, like it's pretty limited, but our mind and our character is like, it's almost unlimited. So yeah, that's very important to focus on.
Nobody wants to realize it, but we're all gonna, you know, go downhill at some
Shannon, thank you very much for your time. You're very generous, and that was that blew away all of my expectations. Thank you very much. Do you have any kind of, you know, your website or, you know, your social media information that you want to plug, or anything that's coming up, or anything at all that you want to promote?
Yeah, sure. So the best place to find me would be on Instagram, which is at @shannonbeer_, or on my website is shannonlbeer.com. I have for people who have been like listening and feel like maybe they want to work on their body image, on my website you can download a free ebook on steps you can take to work on your body image. And if you're a coach who again wants to help your clients with this, then I have a 5-part webinar series on how you can help people to improve their body image. So I'd recommend checking that out. And depending on when this is published, again, Gabrielle and I are releasing our intentional eating webinar series, which will be about all these different approaches to eating and figuring out which one's appropriate for the clients that we're working with and how to sort of navigate that. So these are sort of some of the things that I've got coming up. But yeah, I recommend keeping an eye on the Instagram and on the website, have my own podcast, have a bunch of articles. So all of that stuff will be over there. And if there's anything upcoming, which there likely will be, then that's probably the best way to stay informed.
Brilliant. Yeah. So watch this space basically, because you're doing a lot of good work. Keep it up. Thanks for your time. And we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right. Brilliant.